If you were to ask a room full of music obsessives to close their eyes and just describe the sound of a guitar, you'd get 1,000 different answers.
Oh, 1,000 at least.
You'd get the aggressive, the jagged crunch of punk. You'd get the technical, mathematical shredding of metal.
The rhythmic, woody strum of folk.
Exactly. But if you ask them to describe a sound that feels like floating, a sound that feels like this distinct emotive cry that somehow just defines the emotional landscape of the 1970s.
It's a very specific texture. It really is. It's thick, it's sustained, and it carries this weight of emotion that very, very few musicians ever achieve.
It's not just notes.
No.
Yeah.
You aren't just hearing a Fender Stratocaster, you're hearing a voice.
We are talking, of course, about the voice and the guitar of Pink Floyd. We are talking about David Gilmour. But today, our mission on this deep dive is a little different. We aren't just here to fanboy over the second solo and comfortably numb.
Which we could easily do for an hour.
Oh, absolutely. Or, the opening 4 notes of Shine On You Crazy Diamond, although, let's be honest, we are definitely going to get into the nuts and bolts of how those sounds were made.
It's impossible not to. But the goal today is to move beyond the legend status. Because when you are part of a cultural monolith like Pink Floyd, the individual tends to get swallowed by the brand.
That's a great way to put it.
The Prism logo becomes bigger than the people.
Exactly. And David Gilmour is a figure of immense complexity. I mean, we're exploring a 60-year career here.
Yep.
And the source material we have today is fantastic.
It really is comprehensive.
We're pulling from a biographical profile that covers everything. His early life in Cambridge, the wild ascent in Pink Floyd, a solo discography that goes right up to 2024, and his really surprising personal life and philanthropy.
And what stands out to me in these sources is the sheer variety of his life experience. It's just wild. We aren't just talking about a guy who stood on stage in front of lasers.
No, not at all.
We are talking about a man who discovered pop icons like Kate Bush, navigated one of rock's most famously bitter feuds, piloted vintage planes in air shows, and this statistic always blows my mind, sold a single guitar for nearly $4 million.
For charity.
To give all the money to charity.
That number is just staggering. So if you're listening and you want to understand the actual architecture of Gilmour's career, how he went from a busker getting arrested in France to a commander of the Order of the British Empire, this is the deep dive for you.
I think we have to start at the beginning. We just have to, because the context of his upbringing is actually quite pivotal to understanding the musician he became. It really explains the precision.
Let's unpack that, because usually when we talk about British rock stars from the 60s, we picture these gritty working class backgrounds.
Right.
We think of Liverpool, the industrial grind, the escape from the factory. But Gilmour's start was, well, a bit more ivory tower, wasn't it?
It really was. It was very different. Born in 1946 in Cambridge, England. His parents weren't factory workers, they were academics.
Right. His father, Douglas Gilmour, was a senior lecturer in zoology at the University of Cambridge.
Zoology. And his mother was a teacher who later became a film editor for the BBC. So you've got this very intellectual, probably very structured household.
You have to imagine.
Dinner table conversation probably wasn't about football. It was about, I don't know, genetics or film theory.
Precisely. And that environment is so interesting when you look at his later work. There is a thoughtfulness to Gilmour's playing. It's never chaotic.
That's true.
Even when it's loud and distorted, it's structured, it's architectural. I think that stems from an upbringing that valued clarity and education.
But like so many kids in the 1950s, the academic path wasn't the spark that lit the fire for him.
No, the spark was American rock and roll.
Yeah.
It was Elvis Presley. Heartbreak Hotel.
That was the moment.
That was the moment. Everything changed. And Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock. That was the first single he ever bought back in 1954.
Wow. But the sources point to a specific track that really piqued his interest in the guitar as an instrument. Bye Bye Love by the Everly Brothers.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Because Gilmour is often underrated as a vocalist. Yeah. But he has that melodic, harmonic sensibility that the Everly Brothers just mastered.
He absolutely does.
He isn't just a blues player. He's a melody player through and through.
He is. And speaking of acquiring that first instrument, I love this detail from the source material. It's so good. He didn't just walk into a shop with saved up pocket money and buy a Stratocaster.
He borrowed a guitar from a neighbor.
And never gave it back.
Laughing. It's the classic possession is 9/10 of the law approach to becoming a musician.
It really is.
I feel like that's the most future rock star move possible. Borrow the gear, never return it. He taught himself using a book and records said by Pete Seeger.
Which is another important distinction. He didn't learn from a jazz master or a classical tutor. He learned from Pete Seeger folk music, strumming, chords, the basics of song construction. It's a pretty humble beginning for someone who would become a guitar god.
It is, and it's so important to look at the geography here. He attended the Perse School in Cambridge. Now, the records say he didn't particularly enjoy the schooling itself, but the location is crucial.
Yeah.
Because who else is in this tight little circle in Cambridge at this exact time?
This is where the stars align. It's just unbelievable, really. He meets Syd Barrett and Roger Waters.
They weren't just random musicians he met at an audition in London years later.
No.
These were childhood connections, formative connections.
Right. He and Syd Barrett attended Cambridgeshire College of Arts and Technology. They used to spend their lunchtimes together.
That paints such a vivid picture, doesn't it? Two teenagers, probably skipping class or ignoring their homework, sitting in a canteen somewhere just jamming on acoustic guitars.
Yeah.
They have no idea that they're going to fundamentally change the sound of the 20th century. They're just two kids figuring out a chord progression.
And before the massive fame of Pink Floyd, Gilmour had his own starving artist phase. I think people forget this.
Oh, completely.
They think he stepped right into the limelight of a successful band, but he paid his dues in a very real, very uncomfortable way.
The Bohemian years?
Yeah.
This is my favorite part of the early timeline because it's just so relatable to anyone who's ever tried to make it in the arts. He joins a band called Joker's Wild in 1962. They record a one-sided album, only 50 copies made.
A holy grail for collectors now, obviously.
Obviously. But then comes the French adventure, and this isn't a luxury vacation.
No, not at all.
No.
This is where the reality of the music business just hits them like a truck. At 19, he hitchhikes to Saint-Tropez.
On his own.
Syd Barrett and some friends drive down to meet him in a Land Rover. And what's the first thing that happens? They get arrested.
For busking.
Yeah.
Can you imagine walking down a street in Saint-Tropez in the mid-'60s and seeing David Gilmour and Syd Barrett getting hauled off by the police for playing guitar on the street?
It really establishes that they were living hand to mouth. It was not glamorous. Gilmour and Barrett later went to Paris, camping outside the city, visiting the Louvre not just for culture, but because it was a cheap, warm place to be.
The sources emphasize the struggle. They were hungry.
Genuinely hungry.
Yeah, Gilmour wasn't just sitting around waiting for a record deal. He worked odd jobs. He was a driver and assistant for the fashion designer Ozzie Clark for a bit.
Which is just another one of those amazing little side notes.
And then there's the tour with the band Bullet.
Oh, this story. It's a testament to resilience, or maybe just sheer stubbornness.
I think it's stubbornness.
He's touring France in mid-1967. They are playing covers of chart hits, Sam and Dave, that kind of thing. But the French club owners just don't want to pay them.
Right, and their equipment gets stolen in Paris.
Of course it does.
And when they finally retreat to England, they are so broke they can't even afford gas. They literally have to push their tour bus off the ferry.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this period is just vital. It establishes Gilmour not as a pampered rock star who got lucky, but as a working musician who knew what it was like to be hungry, to have his gear stolen, to push a broken-down van.
It grounds him.
It completely grounds him.
And I think that grounding, that pragmatism, comes into play so much later when he's dealing with Roger Waters' high-concept ideas. Gilmour was always the one asking, okay, but will it work? Is it professional? Can we actually pull this off? That pragmatism comes from pushing the bus.
Absolutely. And that grounding was probably necessary because what happens next is a complete whirlwind. We move into section 2 of our outline, the reluctant replacement.
This is the pivot point.
Yeah.
Late 1967. Pink Floyd has released The Piper at the Gates of Dawn.
A masterpiece.
They are the darlings of the London underground. But Syd Barrett, the genius, the songwriter, the face of the band, is deteriorating.
Rapidly. The mental health issues exacerbated by a heavy psychedelic drug use. It's just a tragic, tragic story.
And Gilmour is brought in. But initially, he wasn't supposed to replace Syd, was he? The plan was actually quite similar to what the Beach Boys did with Brian Wilson.
Right, the non-performing plan. That was the idea. Syd was too erratic to be on stage or do interviews, but he was still the creative engine. So the management thought, let Syd stay home and write the songs and bring in David, the reliable, talented friend, to play the guitar live.
It makes sense on paper. You know, keep the genius songwriter, bring in the reliable hands. But there's that heartbreaking moment the sources mentioned that just shattered that plan.
The recording of See Emily Play, or rather, a session shortly after that.
Right. Gilmour goes to watch them record,
Yeah.
walks into the studio, probably excited to see his old friend Sid, and he realizes that Sid doesn't even recognize him.
That had to be absolutely devastating. The source material describes a look of total vacancy.
I'm gone.
His friend, the guy he practiced with at lunch, the guy he went to Saint-Tropez with, just looked right through him.
That was the moment Gilmour realized the Brian Wilson plan would never work. Sid wasn't just eccentric, he was gone.
By March 1968, it became completely unworkable, and the band agreed he had to leave. And just like that, Gilmour is no longer the backup. He's the guitarist. He's the lead singer on many tracks.
He's the co-frontman. And this changes the band's DNA fundamentally. Nick Mason, the drummer, had a really interesting assessment of this shift. He said Gilmour was the difference between light and dark.
That's such a profound observation from Mason. He elaborated that Sid was all about abstraction, wild improvisation, whimsy, the dark of the unknown, the unpredictable.
Right.
Gilmour brought form and shape. He brought the light of structure.
It goes back to that academic upbringing, doesn't it? The son of a lecturer.
It does. Gilmour, perhaps going back to that Pete Seeger instruction and just his own nature, brought melody and structure. He made the avant-garde accessible. He took the weirdness and gave it a skeleton so it could stand up in a stadium.
You made it so you could enjoy the trip because there was a beautiful melody to hold on to.
Yes.
And throughout the 1970s, he finds his voice, literally and figuratively. But before we get to the massive albums of the 70s, there's a really cool footnote in the source material about the Isle of Wight Festival in 1970.
Oh, I love this. It just shows how embedded he was in the scene, not just in his own little bubble.
David Gilmour, member of Pink Floyd, is just hanging out at the festival. And he doesn't just watch. He ends up helping mix the live sound for Jimi Hendrix.
Just a casual day at the office, mixing for Hendrix. Can you imagine the pressure? But it shows he was a gearhead from the start. He understood sound. He wasn't just a performer. He was a technician.
Which is a perfect segue to talk about his ear for talent, not just his own. This brings us to one of the biggest aha moments in the entire research packet, the Kate Bush connection.
This is a fascinating and crucial piece of music history. If you are a fan of Kate Bush, and frankly, who isn't, you technically have David Gilmour to thank for her entire career.
So let's set the scene. It's the mid-70s. Gilmour receives a demo tape from a mutual friend. Kate Bush is only 16 years old at the time.
And here is the key detail. The tape quality was poor. It was scratchy, home recorded. A lot of established rock stars might have listened to 10 seconds of Hiss and just tossed it in the bin.
Oh, absolutely. Too busy.
But Gilmour heard something. He heard the genius through the noise. And he didn't just pass it along with a good luck note. He actively intervened. He put his money where his mouth was.
He paid for her to record 3 professional demo tracks. He didn't just give her cash. He brought in his friend Andrew Powell to produce. He brought in Jeff Emmerich, the engineer for the Beatles, to run the board.
Think about that.
He gave her the absolute best resources to show what she could actually do.
And then he arranged for the EMI executives to hear that professional tape. That led directly to her signing. He is credited as executive producer on 2 tracks on her debut album, A Kick Inside.
And he played on her later albums, too. He is on Pull Out the Pin, From the Dreaming and Love and Anger from the Sensual World. It really shows a side of Gilmour that isn't just about his own ego. He was a scout. He recognized this singular talent and nurtured it without trying to make it sound like Pink Floyd.
It speaks to his love of music, period. Not just his music, he just loves great songs.
Which is a perfect segue to talk about his music, or rather how he makes it. We need to talk about the artistry. Section 3. The tone. The gear.
The Gilmour sound.
Yeah.
Gilmour himself admits something very surprising in the text, something that might shock a lot of guitar players. He says his fingers aren't very fast.
Which is so refreshing. In a world of shredders, think of his contemporaries like Jimmy Page or Ritchie Blackmore. Gilmour is saying, I'm not a speed demon.
He isn't. His style is characterized by blues-influenced phrasing, huge expressive note bends, and sustain. Just endless sustain. The Times described it as languid grandeur.
Languid grandeur. That is the perfect description. It's lazy in the best possible way. It takes its time. It's confident enough to leave space, which is often harder than playing fast.
Phil Taylor, his longtime guitar technician, the guy who knows the gear better than anyone, really summed it up best. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, you can duplicate the equipment, but you can't duplicate the personality. Right. It's in the fingers, it's in the vibrato, it's in how he physically touches the string.
We have to talk about the equipment anyway, because we promised a deep dive.
Yeah.
And the gear is a huge part of the story. To get that sound, It's not just a guitar plugged into an amp.
No, it's a very specific and influential chain of effects. You've got the high-watt amplifiers.
Let's explain why that matters. Because most rock guys in the 70s were using Marshalls. That was the sound.
Right. Marshalls, when you turn them up, they crunch. They distort naturally. That's the sound of Led Zeppelin. But Gilmour used high watts. High watts have massive headroom.
Meaning?
That means you can turn them up incredibly loud, and they stay clean. They don't distort on their own. They just get louder and louder.
So where does all the distortion and the fuzz come from?
It comes from the pedals. The big muff, the fuzz face. He creates the dirt with the pedals, but then he amplifies that sound with a clean, powerful amp. That gives him that clarity, that articulation, even when the sound is absolutely massive.
And the echo. We have to mention the Benson.
The Benson Echorec, this is key. It wasn't a tape delay like the Echoplex that everyone else used. It used a rotating magnetic metal drum.
A spinning drum.
Yeah. And it gave this sort of metallic, pulsing, almost rhythmic throb to the repeats. That is the sound of Live at Pompeii. It's iconic.
And the vessel for all of this, the machine that all these signals flow through, the Black Strat.
The Black Stratocaster. This instrument is almost as famous as the man playing it.
The history of this thing is wild. He bought it at Manny's Music in New York City in 1970. Why? Because the band's gear had been stolen in New Orleans.
Again with the stolen gear. It's a recurring theme in his early life. It's incredible.
Seriously, you'd think they'd invest in better locks. But this guitar, it wasn't a museum piece he kept behind glass. It was a workhorse. It was a test bed.
It really was the ship of Theseus of guitars. He changed the pick guards, he swapped the necks multiple times, he changed the pickups constantly.
The famous one is the short scale whammy bar he put on it.
Right, and he even drilled holes in it to install custom switches so he could turn on the neck and bridge pickups at the same time, something a normal Strat can't do. It gives you this fuller, almost Telecaster-like sound.
It was a tool. A means to an end.
Exactly. It was used on almost everything from 1970 to 1983. Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, The Wall. If you're humming a solo from that era, it's almost certainly the Black Strat.
And then there's the mystery of the hashtag 0001 Strat.
Ah, yes. The white Stratocaster with the gold hardware. It has the serial number 00001 on the neck plate.
Which implies it's the very first one ever made. The Genesis.
Well, the sources say... maybe not. Seymour Duncan, the legendary pickup specialist, examined it. He calls it a partscaster.
Meaning it was pieced together.
Yeah. He believes it was assembled from different guitars at the factory, maybe for a trade show or as a prototype. But regardless of whether it was truly the first off the line, it's a mythical object. He used it on another Brick in the Wall, Part 2.
And we shouldn't pigeonhole Gilmour as just a guitarist. He's a multi-instrumentalist. He plays bass, saxophone, banjo, drums.
And he played bass on a lot of Pink Floyd tracks. This is an interesting detail that gets overlooked.
This is a point of contention, or maybe playful friction, between him and Waters. He played that beautiful fretless bass part on Hey You. He played the bass on the iconic opening of One of These Days. And the sources say he often played bass on the records because he could do it faster or more efficiently than Roger Waters.
Which Gilmour noted Roger used to thank him for, in a sort of backhanded way. He'd say, "Thanks for winning me all those bass pulls."
It was a joke, but it's a joke that hints at the dynamic that would eventually just tear them apart. Roger was the concept guy, the lyricist. David was the musician, the one who could execute the ideas with precision.
The instrumental powerhouse.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room, Section 4, The Great Schism. Gilmour versus Waters.
This is the narrative arc that dominates the second half of the Pink Floyd story. And the breakdown really started to accelerate in the early 80s.
During The Wall, and especially the final cut, tension was peaking. Gilmour felt his talents were being completely underused. He felt like he was being treated like a session musician in his own band.
He was a writer, but his name wasn't getting on the credits.
He actually released his first solo album, simply titled David Gilmour, in 1978. Just to have an outlet for his own musical ideas.
And here is a key fact that I think explains everything about their creative relationship. The music for Comfortably Numb, arguably their greatest collaborative moment, maybe one of the greatest songs ever, was originally written for Gilmour's solo album.
But it didn't make the cut for his own record.
It was a leftover demo. He didn't have lyrics for it. So when they were struggling for material for The Wall, Gilmour brought it out. Waters took that beautiful, melancholic music and wrote the lyrics about the doctor and the rock star.
And Gilmour added those two monumental solos. It shows how their best work often came from this friction, this merging of Gilmour's melodic sense and Waters' conceptual rigor.
The whole was greater than the sum of its parts.
But by 1985, the rope just snapped.
Waters resigns. He declares Pink Floyd a spent force creatively. He basically says, "It's over. Without me, the conceptualist, there is no Pink Floyd." He tried to dissolve the partnership.
But Gilmour and Nick Mason said, no, it's not.
This was the power move. They decided to continue without him. And this leads to the creation of a new era of Floyd and a huge legal battle.
To make that new music, Gilmour buys the Astoria,
The houseboat.
a beautiful historic houseboat on the Thames. He turns it into a recording studio. This is where they record A Momentary Lapse of Reason. It sounds idyllic recording on the river, but the legal and personal pressure must have been immense.
Oh, absolutely. Waters was suing them to stop them from using the name Pink Floyd. The press was calling them a fake Floyd.
And Gilmour had a very specific philosophy here, a mission statement for this new version of the band. He felt that under Waters, the band had become too lyric-driven, too much about the words, the politics, the ranting. He said he wanted to restore the balance.
He wanted to bring back the music, the atmosphere, the floating quality we talked about at the start. He wanted sound and lyrics to be equal partners again.
And that balance definitely shifted back toward the atmospheric. But the feud, I mean, it didn't end in the 80s, did it?
No, and sadly, the sources indicate it has flared up significantly in recent years. It's not just old men grumbling, it's active hostility.
We have to address the 2023 incident. This was all over social media, all over the news. Polly Sampson, Gilmour's wife, and the band's primary lyricist for the post-Waters era, tweeted some incredibly strong words about Roger Waters.
She accused him of being anti-Semitic, a Putin apologist, and a megalomaniac, among other things. It was a very public, very harsh condemnation. There was no ambiguity.
And Gilmour's response wasn't to stay silent or play peacemaker.
Yeah.
He quoted her tweet and added, "Every word demonstrably true."
That's about as definitive a statement as you can make. It shows that the wounds haven't healed. In fact, they may have deepened because of these modern political differences.
It's sad to see Nick Mason has weighed in on this too, from a more historical perspective. He notes that he felt Waters never really respected Gilmour's writing.
That's the core of it.
Waters believed writing, the lyrics, the concept was everything, and guitar playing, no matter how brilliant, was secondary. It was just decoration.
Which is such a fundamental clash of artistic values. One values the message, the other values the sound and the feeling that delivers the message.
Exactly. And that clash is tragic, but as we said, it also produced some of the greatest music ever made.
It's the classic paradox.
So let's move to section 5, because life goes on. Gilmour didn't stop making music just because the feud continued.
Yeah.
He has had a robust, if not prolific, solo career.
His solo trajectory is really interesting because it's so sporadic. He doesn't just turn out albums every 2 years. About Face in 1984 directly addressed the murder of John Lennon and his fractured relationship with Waters.
And then he waits 22 years.
22 years. On an Island in 2006, released on his 60th birthday, went to #1 in the UK. It was a huge success.
And he's collaborated with everyone. I mean, the list is endless. The
That's
Orb, Paul McCartney, Supertramp, Brian Ferry at Live Aid. He's a musician's musician. If you need that specific Gilmour sound, there is only one guy to call.
You can't replicate it. We also have to mention the final bows of Pink Floyd because they did come back, in a way. The Endless River in 2014 was built from instrumental sessions with the late Richard Wright, the keyboardist.
Right. It was a tribute to Rick.
It was, and Gilmour was very, very clear at the time, this is the end. This is the last thing we'll do.
It wasn't quite the end. There was Hey, Hey, Rise Up in 2022.
Yes, the protest song, a complete surprise. Gilmour and Mason reunited the Pink Floyd banner for a one-off single to protest the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
This was deeply personal for Gilmour, wasn't it? The sources are clear on that.
Very. His daughter-in-law is Ukrainian. His grandchildren have that heritage. He was motivated by a genuine anger and a desire to support the country. It sampled a Ukrainian musician, Andrei Klivnik, singing a protest song in Kyiv.
It wasn't about reviving the band for money or a nostalgia tour. It was about using the massive platform of the Pink Floyd name for a specific cause right now.
Exactly. A tool for protest.
And now we're in 2024. Gilmour has released Luck and Strange.
This album is fascinating. Recorded in Brighton, London during the lockdowns. The themes are heavy mortality, aging, looking back on a long life.
And it's a family affair, which is really interesting. His wife Polly wrote the lyrics. His daughter Romany plays harp and sings beautiful harmony vocals. His son Charlie even contributed lyrics. It feels very intimate.
And Gilmour made a very, very bold claim about it. He called it his best work since The Dark Side of the Moon.
Wow, that is a high bar. That's putting it above the wall, above what you were here, above his other solo work.
It is. But it shows he's not just resting on nostalgia. He believes in what he's doing right now. He's still chasing that perfect sound, that perfect song he's not done creating.
Which brings us to the final section of our profile. The man as a private citizen and a philanthropist. Because if you think his guitar collection is impressive, wait until you hear what he did with it.
The auction. This is the moment that I think truly defines his character in the later years. 2019, Christie's in New York. Gilmour auctions off 120 of his personal guitars.
Including the Black Strat, the actual guitar we talked about earlier. The one that played Comfortably Numb, the one that played Money, the one that played Shine On.
Imagine owning that piece of history. The sound of the 70s.
It sold for nearly $4 million. $3.975 million to be exact.
A world record-breaking sale for a guitar at the time. But the total raise for the whole collection was $21.5 million. And here is the kicker, the most important part of the story. He didn't keep a dime.
100% of the proceeds went to Client Earth, an environmental charity that uses lawyers to fight climate change through legislation and court cases.
It really says something profound about his priorities. He's willing to part with these talismans of his career, these objects that literally define him in the public eye, to fight for the future of the planet. He basically said, I don't need these anymore. The world needs the help more.
It wasn't the first time either. This is a pattern. He sold his London house in 2003 for £3.6 million and gave all the proceeds to the charity crisis for a housing project for the homeless.
He seems to walk the walk. Politically, he describes himself as a socialist, a proper Manchester Guardian reader.
And he's an atheist.
Yeah.
He's very clear about his worldview. He believes in the here and now and our collective responsibility to it.
And we can't forget the planes, intrepid aviation.
Yes. This is the other side of the coin.
Yeah.
The boy with the toys. It's not all serious philanthropy.
He had a company, Intrepid Aviation. He collected vintage aircraft. He's an experienced pilot. He flew a P-51 Mustang in air shows.
I mean, that's just cool.
But true to form, when it became too commercial, when it became a business instead of a hobby, he sold it.
He said it became too corporate. He just wanted to fly old planes, not run a corporation.
I respect that so much. He knows what he loves, and he knows when the joy is gone. He's not afraid to walk away.
So let's wrap this up. We've gone from the boy in Cambridge borrowing a guitar and never giving it back,
to the starving busker pushing a van in France,
to the reluctant replacement who became a global rock legend,
and finally to the elder statesman selling that very same guitar for millions to save the planet. It's an incredible life arc.
David Gilmour stands as this incredible bridge. He bridges the blues roots of the 50s and 60s with the atmospheric, progressive future of music.
He was the reluctant frontman who ended up leading one of the world's biggest bands for decades after its primary songwriter left, and took it to even greater commercial heights.
And if we look at the final provocative thought here, Gilmour has repeatedly said Pink Floyd is done. He believes his new work, Luck and Strange, is his best in 50 years. He raises a huge question. Does an artist's legacy rely solely on the band that made them famous? Or can they truly transcend it in their final act?
And considering that friction with Waters, that fire that burned between them for so long, was that tension actually the secret ingredient? Was the misery and the conflict necessary for the magic?
That is the eternal question of rock and roll, isn't it? The harmony on the record comes from the discord in the studio.
It seems to be a common theme.
Indeed. So here is our sign-off challenge to you, the listener. Go back and listen to Comfortably Numb or Time. But don't just listen to the notes. Listen to the bends. Listen to the space between the notes. And think about the man, the pilot, the philanthropist, the busker, the father who is making that sound.
It changes how you hear it. It adds a whole new dimension of meaning to it.
It really does. Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you on the next one.